Jerry Tipton, who has been writing about Kentucky basketball, Dad, since 1981, I guess. So that was back when you were just kind of getting your feet wet as a head coach at Alabama.
Yeah, Jerry's done a good job. Yeah, Jerry's done an excellent job for Kentucky basketball over the years, and I appreciate him taking time to be on. Jerry, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning, guys. I'm doing well.
A statement made by Calipari last night after the game sounded like nobody wanted to be at practice because it was going to be a tough one. Based on that statement, are they not playing hard? They're not playing well? What's the problem?
Well, I think Calipari mentioned buy-in last night and suggested that some of the players are not totally committed to the approach that Kentucky wants to take. And Isaiah Briscoe, who's kind of a team leader, sophomore guard, he kind of said the same thing 2-3 weeks ago, that some guys had to buy in more. And we haven't quite gotten the exact explanation of what that means. But it's obvious that, and this last night was an example of this, things can be going along pretty well, and then all of a sudden they start throwing the ball around, they start taking bad shots, and, it just becomes a different kind of game. Last night they were ahead by 25 with about 8 minutes to go, and LSU, I believe this is right, cut it to 6 inside the final minute. And that's been fairly typical of Kentucky, at least the Kentucky of the last 3-4 weeks, where there's one kind of game going along, and then all of a sudden it becomes a different kind of game, and they're kind of fighting for their lives. They're as John Calipari uses the word casual, that I think my feeling is that they don't have as big a margin for error as they think they do, and it shows pretty consistently.
Well, they've not been a really great three-point shooting team. They don't really have an inside presence. Would that be two factors besides hustle that might enter into it?
Well, I think part of it is defense.
Yeah.
That their defense has not been, certainly it hasn't been consistent. And in the second halves of the last 5 games, now don't hold me to these numbers exactly, but I believe the other teams are shooting like 55%, something like that, in the second halves of games. And it's been startling to see how often the other team's guards have gotten into the lane, gotten to the basket area, sometimes all the way in and laying it in. The first guy that did this again and again and again, and you thought, what in the world's going on here, was Lamar Peters, the freshman point guard for Mississippi State. And that was a game where it was one kind of game going along, and then Malik Monk got a technical for hanging on the rim after a dunk, kind of showing off. And then all of a sudden the game changed, and Mississippi State came charging back, and it was a one-possession game late in the game. So, yeah, defense, I think, if John Calipari had to have one thing change, I think it would be defense. Their on-ball defense hasn't been up to snuff by Kentucky standards, and they're even playing some zone.
We're talking with Jerry Tipton, Lexington Herald there in Lexington, Kentucky, obviously. Jerry, early on in the season, Kentucky was fabulous in transition. I had never seen a team, maybe the exception of North Carolina, get the ball down the floor so fast. I mean, they were throwing it in even on makes, and they were dunking the ball at the other end. And I think maybe teams have adjusted to that. I don't know if they're sending 2 guys back, but they don't seem to be getting as many baskets or easy baskets in transition, which is turning it into more of a half-court game there. And that's my first question. How are teams taking this away? My second question is, do you think Kentucky peaked too early? I think sometimes you peak so early, you're playing your best basketball maybe a month ago, and now they're going through a downtime. Did this team maybe peak too early?
Well, I don't know what to say about peaking too early. I think I really like what you said about other teams adjusting. I think you're right that early on, and when they played Arizona State in the Bahamas, and John Calipari invited the media to watch practice the day before that game, and they ran this drill where get the defensive rebound and make two passes and lay it in at the other end. And they were amazing how quickly they were moving up and down the floor. And I think that's obviously where they're at their best, when they can turn you over and run down. And they've promoted the fact that I think their average time of possession is 14 seconds, which is good. But it also, I think, leads to a problem if the defense is back and you're still trying to play fast. Then you're more likely to take bad shots or turn it over in this haste to play fast. And I think other teams have adjusted. I think they've just got back more. They're being more careful with the ball. I think also they're playing better teams at this portion of the season in the SEC and at Kansas in the Big 12 Challenge than they were earlier on for the most part. And I think teams are trying to make them play possession by possession and trying to outsteady them. And, it seems like a good strategy.
Yep.
Jerry, it's a prima donna that they sign, a guy that's better than everybody else and hard to coach, and Cal does a good job of coaching those kinds of kids. In your relationship with them off the floor, is this a different mentality? I know it is year after year. I understand that, but is this different from the other, prima donnas that they've coached in other years? Is this a different group of kids?
Prima donnas.
Well, I don't know about prima donna. They had a little incident. Maybe you guys are aware of this. That near the end of the game at Florida, where they lost by 22 points last Saturday, and it was the worst beating Florida's ever put on them. And the TV camera happened to show Malik Monk, and he had this big grin on his face. And this caused a stir here, and John Calipari addressed it on the SEC teleconference Monday. The students were singing happy birthday to him, and he smiled because of this. And, of course, it doesn't look good. It led people to the conclusion that he didn't care or it wasn't that important to him. And I thought too much was made out of it. The game before that against Georgia, he scored 37 points. He almost single-handedly won the game for him. And, I wouldn't – when you deal with these guys and talk to them after games or the day before games and stuff like that, they really don't come across as having an attitude of I'm a superstar. But they do have a tendency to, as John Calipari said, try for cute plays rather than just be more prudent about what you're doing. Be more fundamentally sound. And but I think it's more a case of they're susceptible to trying to show off and try to make a fancy play where just being fundamentally sound would be much more, which would be wiser, and it's cost them at times.
Losing that game at Florida the way they did, everybody said, boy, they're going to really take it out on LSU. I mean, they're going to pound them. And they did. I think they got a big lead. Obviously, they gave up 58 points in the second half. So I think Dad said that Calipari obviously wasn't happy. You wouldn't want to be at practice today. I guess with your experience being around Kentucky and John Calipari, one, will he get these guys' attention, and what kind of effort do you think we'll see here in Tuscaloosa against the Alabama team? Just had to play a 4 overtime game. It's a noon game here in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, every time Kentucky plays, the building is full, so they're used to doing that. But where will their heads be, in your opinion, when they come to Tuscaloosa?
Well, it's hard to say, to be honest. I mean, let's put it this way: every road game, with the exception of Ole Miss, has been a struggle for them. Every one of them they've either lost, which they did at Florida, and the startling thing about that was I thought Florida was the more athletic team, and they certainly were more attuned to what was going on. You know what I mean? They were sharper. They were the aggressor, and Kentucky was reacting to Florida. But the other games at Vandy, it came right down to the end. I'm trying to remember the games. Mississippi State, it came down to the end. They lost at Tennessee. So I don't think there's any reason not to think that it would be a competitive game going into the last 4-minute segment where either team could win. Now we'll see what happens. And it seems like part of that is Kentucky's, they're there to blame because of these moments where John Calipari last night called it reverting. They reverted back to, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just being freshmen. But he's had other teams like this. The team in 2014, that was a real struggle. And late in the season, I think they lost 4 out of their last 7. And they were like 1-6 against ranked teams, and it was just a struggle all season. They got hot in the tournament, and of course the tournament is what everybody remembers. And they went on to the Final Four. They went to the championship game. They could have won the national championship. And at this time of the year, there was a lot of grumbling, and it was just a real struggle for the coaches to rein them in and to bring them into the approach they wanted them to take. But they managed it, and that's what everybody's hoping for this year.
I
don't want to. I hear myself, and it sounds like I'm thinking, boy, all these problems are terrible. I think they're 19-5 or something like that. So I mean,
Well, they're right where they normally are. Alabama did them a favor last night going to South. Nobody thought South Carolina was going to lose that game. So now they're right there. They can really control their own destiny because they beat South Carolina head to head. I guess, and they get Florida, I would assume, the last game there. So that, that gives John Calipari something to preach about because they control whether they win the regular season or not now.
I don't know how much they care about that, to be honest with you. But I think Alabama beating South Carolina would certainly, you would think, get their attention.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, I think that was a surprise. And like you said earlier, after the Florida game, we thought they were really going to put the hammer down on LSU, and they sort of did. They were up 25 with 8 minutes to go. But then, you're almost looking for it now when are they going to go through a 4 or 5 minute period where they throw the ball around and they turn it over? And I really thought their defense was going to be more consistent last night. But going into the second half, that was on my mind. Are they going to have another questionable defensive performance in the second half? And sure enough, I don't know. I think LSU shot like 62% in the second half, something like that. And it's been, that's been a consistent pattern now.
Is there any idea where they might put them on the 11th when they give the top 16 teams? Will they be a 3 or will they be a 4? Will they be a 2? What would they be?
Well, right now it's just guesswork, of course, but we think they'll be no better than a 3 or 4. That seems to be where they should be.
Yeah. Okay.
It's hard to make an argument for something better when you've lost. You had lost 3 out of 4, including one by 22 points.